In the section 4, it's called Gate of Trust in God. Trust. As I said, I'm going to say it in Hebrew and I'm going to translate it, then we're going to expound on it. What is the special value of trust? You trust God. We find God says, if you do this, you'll merit blessing. And if you don't do this, there'll be very serious consequences. And you do the right thing and you don't see the blessings. If you trust God, you understand he's good for his word. And for whatever reason, he chooses to withhold, because maybe you're not as righteous as you may believe you are. Or maybe giving you whatever you may receive may not be in your best interest right now. As a result of that, he withholds it. But trust means if you trust someone implicitly, even though you don't have all the answers, based on the trust, the person is still credible to you because you have the trust. Toloso v'toroso, the benefit regarding Torah, minuchas nafshu b'tchono alokov yisborach. Person has a certain tranquility when he relies on God. As a slave or a subject has faith in his master, relies on his master, that whatever his needs are, the master will provide for the slave or for the subject. If you don't have faith in God, that means you have other basis for your security. And when you don't rely on who you should rely on, God says, you know something? Go chart your own course. I'm not with you. I'm not backing you. A person who has any reliance, anything but God himself, God removes his divine providence from that person. Very serious. And he's in the hands of the one who actually relies on him. You believe he's your ace in the hole? If that is the case, based on his situation, he will determine your fate. Because God says, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And hopefully, you realize the mistake you made. And if you realize the mistake you made, then you will return. It's interesting. We find that the Romans, when they destroyed the second temple, first they destroyed it, and then it says they plowed under the city of Jerusalem. They wanted there should not be a trace of the history of the Jewish history. And the Mishnah, when it speaks about the five tragedies that took place on Tisha B'Av, and the 9th of Av, the destruction of the first temple, the second temple, the Jews were decreed to wander for 40 years in the desert and pass away over this 40-year period. The destruction of Beitar, which is the equivalent destruction of the temple, and the plowing under of Jerusalem. After the temple was destroyed, the Romans plowed under Jerusalem. So I ask the question, and once the temple was destroyed and everything was destroyed, does it make a difference that they plowed under Jerusalem, didn't plow under Jerusalem? And the Romans were geniuses when it came to strip a person of his identity. Even if a person's home is destroyed, but his culture is intact or his identity is intact, and his history is intact, a person always has hope he could rebuild. Why? Because he knows who he is, he knows where he wants to go, and he knows where he wants to return to. But if a person has no inkling of what his history is, you know what happens? The person just goes in circles. Total confusion. The Romans, by destroying, not only destroyed the temple and destroying Yerushalayim, they plowed it on that they didn't want there to be a remnant, a trace of the history of the Jewish people. As a result of that, if you don't know who you are, what happens? You totally assimilate, you disappear. And that's exactly what they wanted. But they made a big mistake. Two mistakes. Firstly, the Western Wall was left. So that itself, for the past 2,000 years, we've been going there, and we commemorate the destruction of the temple. We have a day of Tisha B'Av. We don't forget. The Jews always were connected to the Torah. You know, the whole concept of dark ages. Among the Jewish people, there's never dark ages. There was never illiteracy among us. Jews always studied, they read, they wrote. They always were able to read and write, always. Because the Jews were always connected to their religion. Other nations, that their ability to do anything, it's unrelated to their beliefs. You believe in that, it begins with, ends with that. Here, it's a full occupation. It's knowledge. Torah is knowledge. How do I live as a Jew? I have positive, negative commandments. I have the obligation to study. I have the obligation to understand who God is. So therefore, we were never detached. Only our physical setting was detached, was disrupted. But our understanding of who we should be and what we are, that was never removed from us. Therefore, among us, there were never dark ages. There's never a dark age. Jeremiah says, it's a verse in Jeremiah, he says, the Jewish people, they committed two wrongs. Firstly, they abandoned me. They left me. They went and they dug water cisterns or created that were broken. A water cistern that's broken, what happens? You put water in, it just leaks out. It doesn't retain the water. They abandoned me and they went and they dug water cisterns that weren't able to contain the water. The Omar, the Amiras Kvodom, and they exchanged their belief. And they went, they banned me, and they did the golden calf. It's an ox eating grass. We say this every day before the Aleinu. Jeremiah says, blessed is the man whose faith is in God, and God is his faith. That's his rock of Gibraltar. If God is your staying course, that's your anchor, you're a blessed person. Blessed, King David says in Psalms, blessed is the man who has put God as his faith. That's the source of what? Security. And he did not turn to the heathens and those who speak falsehood. The Omar, another verse of Jeremiah. Cursed is the man whose faith is in man. The some bosses row, and his flesh of his arm. His faith is his arm, his power, and he's removed himself from God. Cursed is that person. You know why he's cursed? Because anybody who God abandons is cursed. He becomes a cursed person. You know, there's an expression, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. God's the provider. God has shown you everything. And then when you believe you can do without him, you try to push him overboard. God says, you know, you're making a big mistake. When you push me overboard, you have no interest in me, I have no interest in you. And unfortunately, if you don't learn the easy way, you learn the hard way. And when you start feeling the pain, and you start, but not always, a person could be so sick, so not well, he loses his senses. He doesn't even realize what his condition is. And God forbid that's what happens. A Jew assimilates. He's lost the sense of Jewishness. You know, what is a Jew? A light unto the nations. We teach people how to be ethical and moral. Judaism becomes an ethical, moral religion. That's where it begins, that's where it ends. So if you find a non-Jew who's no less ethical, moral than you are, it's a match. But that's not what it's all about. What about your Jewishness? What about your heritage? What about the unbroken chain that goes back a few thousand years when we became a Jewish people? And we chose my God. And we're given his doctrine, his way of life, his prescription of life. All that is out the window. Doesn't have any value. Even if you're aware of it. There was a case a number of years ago. There was a bombing in Tel Aviv. a suicide bomber. 25 Jews were killed in a club in Tel Aviv. And there was a certain person who came to Yad Avram. He was about Chovos, he was in law school, became a lawyer. His father lived in Hollywood, Florida, and his father was an assimilated Jew. So I said to him, when you heard that 22 Jews were killed, this wasn't just started the suicide bombers. How did your father react to it? Was he pained? 22 Jews blown into smithereens. He said to me, when you hear people are killed in Bosnia, on Biafra, are you affected by it? That's how his father's affected by the Jews being killed by the suicide bomb in Tel Aviv. His whole sense of Jewishness doesn't exist. It's humanity. Unfortunately, so many people are killed. But is it something personal? Nothing personal to him. That means his sense of Jewishness is totally lost. I once said over a story, very important story. There was a trial in the 1800s, late 1800s. It was called the Bayless trial. Bayless was a lawyer in Russia, and he was framed that he murdered a Christian child. And why did he murder her? This was a blood libel because Jews, when they bake matzah and Pesach, they use the blood of Christian children to bake the matzah. So they hired the best lawyer for him to defend him. The whole thing was a frame-up. And if factually Bayless would have been found guilty, there would have been pogroms throughout Russia, murdering a few million Jews. That's what would have happened. The government would have let loose, take the protection off the communities. It would have been disastrous. And that's exactly what the government wanted to do. Nikolai II was the Tsar. He was a rabid anti-Semite, and that's what he wanted to bring about. The destruction of all Jewish communities in Russia. This is Bayless. So what happened? So they went to consult with the Ramesh Shapiro, who was a genius, who was a Torah sage, who founded the Daf Yomi. And they went to him and they asked him, what should we look out for? What would be the most damning question? They'll ask a statement, and if we don't respond properly, we lose the case. If we lose the case, God forbid, it's tragedy beyond your understanding what tragedy is. That's how tragic it's going to be. What happened? So he said, the prosecutor at the trial is going to bring up a passage in the Talmud. The passage says, based on the verse in Yechezkel, Atem kriyim Adam, hem lo kriyim Adam. Only the Jew is called Adam. A Gentile is not called Adam. So literal translation, a Jew is a human being. A non-Jew is not a human being. So if that's a non-Jew is not a human being, you could snuff him out like a rodent, like an insect. He says, if you don't answer that question properly, God forbid, he's found guilty, it's over. God forbid. Millions of Jews are going to be killed. He said, he's going to ask you that question, I'm going to give you the answer to answer the question. What you can answer is like this. The only Hebrew word that there's no plural in the Hebrew language is Adam. Every other word has a single and multiple and plural. Singular and plural. Adam is only singular. There's no plural. He says, why? Atem kriyim Adam. To defend Bayless in this trial, every Jewish community in the world, Sephardic, Ashkenazic, American, secular, every community in the world contributed to the fund to defend Bayless. When it comes to Jewish people, we're united with like one person. That's Atem kriyim Adam. The Jewish people were always united to a level that we don't see. It's him, it's not me. It's his concern, it's not my concern. I don't meddle, no. It's a Jewish issue, we're all in it together. Therefore, as a result of that, every Jew contributes to Bayless, every Jew prays for Bayless, that he should be found innocent for that reason. What happened? They came to the trial. Sure enough, the prosecutor cited that passage in the Talmud, and this is what they answered. And when they answered that, it was satisfying to the judge. He was found innocent. And because of that, thank God, the pogroms never took place in Europe for that reason. But what if this person loses his Jewishness? I don't contribute to that. It's not my thing, you know? I belong to the Peace Corps, you know? I build a sanitation system in Africa, so they shouldn't be subject to diphtheria and to cholera and this and that. There's a Jew. Well, where's your feeling of Jewishness? There's so many Jewish causes. That's what you're busy with. These people, because they don't have that sense of Jewishness, you know where they end up? They assimilate. And eventually they disappear off the face of the earth because they lose their sense of Jewishness. If you abandon God and your source of confidence and security is elsewhere, God says you're on your own. God forbid, once you're on your own and you don't take hints from God, every time you get a little pinch, a little pain, you don't turn around to see where it's coming from, and you just keep going in that wrong direction, eventually you become totally desensitized. And if the person, God forbid, becomes desensitized, eventually he disappears. Full assimilation. What a person says, I'm a genius. I see things better than anyone else. I know better. I'm a strategist. I'm a community builder. I'm a statesman. And whatever you want to attribute your ability to, it's independent of God. This emanates from the person's ego. He's egocentric, self-centered. Yigalarik. He will toil for naught. He's wasting his time. There's an expression, you can't fight your way out of a paper bag. You don't see the forest from the trees. You can believe what you believe. You may succeed on Wall Street. You may succeed as a gangster. You may succeed as a politician. But ultimately, you're paving the way to who knows where, into the oblivion. Once you cut your connection with God. And with all the strategies, the objective that you're supposed to achieve is not going to happen. He traps the wise through their cunningness. You think you're so cunning. You think you're so shrewd. Ultimately, your shrewdness will lead to your own destruction. In Yiddish, there's an expression, a chacham is a wise man. A chacham. In Yiddish, a iber chacham. Iber chacham means a smart aleck. You're too wise. Sometimes people are so wise, they wisen themselves out of the box. You're out of the box, you're truly out of the box. You think you could beat every odds, every game. And you think you could always deceive everyone. Ultimately, you're going to get caught. Ultimately, you're going to fall on your face. But Omar Kohelis, King Solomon, the wise man who ever lived, writes, Shavti v'ro tachz hashemesh. I've taken a backseat and I'm observing under the sun in this existence. Just because a person is swift, he has swiftness. That's not the reason why he's able to move quickly. And just because you're powerful, that doesn't mean you're going to have victory at war. And just because you're wise doesn't mean you're going to have bread on the table. You have people, they have IQs of Einstein. They don't have two nickels to rub together. And you have people that barely illiterate, they're billionaires. They're real estate moguls. V'omar, kefirim roshu v'reivu. Those who rejected God, the heretics, they became impoverished and ultimately they starved. But those who seek out God, they're missing nothing. So you're going to say, what do you mean? The person's a tzaddik. he doesn't go hungry. He goes hungry. So what does it mean? Dosh Hashem, they will not be missing anything. A person who's a tzaddik, he has everything in perspective. There's a whole concept of Ezo Chochem Asamech B'Chelko. A person who's wise, he's satisfied with his lot. When he has less, a person's a tzaddik, puts it in perspective. I'm not missing anything. If God is withholding it from me, he has a reason. It's in my best interest. A person has a water retention problem. So the doctor says, after a certain hour, you can't drink water anymore because you have water retention. And it'll build up pressure around your heart, you'll die. So the person, after that hour, doesn't have any water, doesn't drink water. And he's thirsty. So somebody says, would you like some water? I see you haven't drunk. You can become dehydrated. One who seeks out God will never be lacking any good. Because when he puts everything in perspective, even when something negative happens to him, he understands it's in his best interest. Because the Talmud tells us, whatever God does, it's in the person's best interest. Therefore, he's not lacking. He's not missing anything. You know, the people couldn't get on the Titanic, and they could afford it. They were seething with envy, literally. Here, their peers get on the Titanic, and what are they going to say about them? They're left behind. A few weeks into, a short time afterwards, they thank God 1,000,000 times they weren't on the Titanic. The one who saw it right from day one, he didn't have the Titanic to go down to see it correctly. These other people had to see the Titanic go down to understand how lucky they were that they never got on that boat. But the person's a tzaddik, he never had an interest in going on the Titanic. He doesn't need all this ego stroking. He doesn't need it. That's not what life's all about. Life is not to be complimented. That's not what life's all about. To be in the limelight. That's not what it's about. It's to address objective. To address what is the value in life. What is success? Is it success to be the richest man in the world? What's success? Success is to be effective and to utilize your potential. Whatever that potential is, you've succeeded. It's not to be anybody but who you're supposed to be. It's not to prove anything to anybody, but to be who you're supposed to be. One who seeks out God, which is the objective of life, to have that relationship, you're never lacking. But you're starving to death. You're dying. You're being put to death by the enemy. You're going to the crematorium. Doesn't make a difference. The Jews in the crematorium, they went into the gas chambers by saying, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. They declared their belief. How? Nobody asked, where's God? Why am I dying? They went with absolute faith, and they died to sanctify God's name. Within this monstrous setting, they were beyond demons, these people. But they put it in perspective. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's it. There's only God. There's God's will. God gives, God takes. That's where it begins, that's where it ends. That's Dorsh Hashem Lo Yashro Kol Tov. The one who seeks out God's never missing any good. He's not missing anything. You need to say you didn't go to the safari in Africa. You missed it. Missed it. You think that's what life's all about? I mean, you don't have that, you didn't buy that diamond bracelet for your wife and that necklace. Is it because you couldn't afford it? No. Had nothing to do with it. I have no interest in that. My wife has no interest in it. That's not what life's all about. You mean you're not part of Forbes 500? That's not what life's all about. You don't wear those Gucci shoes and you have to go to the podiatrist every 3 weeks because they're too tight on your feet. You don't know what you're missing. You know what it means to have that pain every time you walk and then be relieved? I prefer not to have the pain. It's okay. I don't need the Gucci shoes and the Tumi luggage and everything else that goes along with it. You know, somebody hears me speaking this way, they say, no, the rabbi, he missed the boat. I think you should go get medicated. Okay? You can say what you want, but everybody charts his own path in life. And if you're smart, you follow the road that's paved properly, which leads to the destination. You want to arrive where you're supposed to arrive. Everybody himself, who drew that roadmap? Who drew it? The economists, the historians, the revisionists. Who drew it? We have a roadmap. God drew that roadmap. You follow it. He wrote the triptych. You don't need AAA to write that triptych. When we left Egypt, there was clouds of glory that led us at night. There was a fire pillar of cloud. And they followed. And they followed. They arrived. After 40 years, they arrived in the promised land. And why did they arrive sooner? Because they messed up. Because they weren't worthy to arrive sooner. They were ready to go in. The person has a trainer. He's training to fight, be a world champion, go in the ring. And his trainer says, you're not ready for it. You go in there, you'll be pummeled, you'll be killed. You got to be ready to go into that ring. You need another 5 years of training. You have to put on so much more weight and so much more muscle mass. Otherwise, you're going to be killed. You got to be ready for it. Your reflexes are not where they should be. You got to work on all this to get in the ring to meet that challenge. Otherwise, they'll knock you out. The first round, you're knocked out. You don't want to be knocked out. God gave us the prescription how to get not knocked out. People, they pride themselves. They have hospitals today have the upper floors like a 5-star hotel. Who could afford it? I mean, you're in the room, 4 people to a room. I mean, you fool. You're dying of cancer. You have emphysema. Your cancer is metastasized. You're priding yourself that you're in the room. You're in the Waldorf Astoria in the hospital. You know something? That's not what you pride yourself. You pride yourself when you're there, you realize, and you write checks to charity, which you never wrote your whole life. That's what you pride yourself. Not that you're in a hotel setting in the hospital, in the cancer ward, or in the ICU. Sato answered. Sato asked that question, he answered the question. Ask the question. Go ahead.
Yes, so Rabbi, so earlier you say God gives, God takes away, and there's a lot in between. But God, when you pass on, apparently, God asks you, did you see this? Did you see that? Did you go here? Did you go there? There was so much to do and so much to see. And so there,
so much to benefit from, and you did not. Right. That question is asked by Rabbi Lutzato. Rabbi Lutzato will tell you exactly what he answered. Judah the prince, who's the prince of Israel, who's the redactor of the oral law, lived in the palace. And before he passed away, he raised his 10 fingers to heaven. And he says to God, and makes a declaration, I did not benefit from this world as much as my pinky. That's how much I did not benefit from this world. I mean, whatever he took was only purely to serve God. Outside of that, he was not distracted. So he asks, there's a Jerusalem Talmud that after 120 years, they asked him, why weren't you at the Swiss Alps? Why don't you go here? There's so much to see, the 7 wonders of the world. You should have seen it. And there's a claim. So he explains it this way. This is where he reconciles the two. A person who's at a level that unless he sees it, he's going to be distracted. It's like a person needs 3 square meals a day, and he wants to become self-righteous, and eats 1 a day. They say, are you a fool? You're going hungry. You need 3 square meals a day. You have no right to afflict yourself by denying yourself the extra nourishment you need, because you need that nourishment. But let's say a person, his physique and his physiology doesn't require it. Eating more than 1 meal a day is not necessary. It's all superfluous. A person's at a certain level of understanding of God and purpose in life. I don't need the Swiss Alps to give me an understanding of who God is. I don't need to be impressed with the 7 wonders of existence. I see God when I sit in my little 2 by nothing room and I study the Torah. I have a greater understanding of God than going and see the falls in Victoria Falls in Africa. I don't need that. But the one who needs that to bring him to that level of clarity. So they say, so why don't you go there? It was there, and you were capable of going. You should have gone there. And if you would have gone there, you would have understood what you don't understand. That's how we reconcile the two.